So yeah, like I said, I've already got all the material posted in Canvas, so just take good notes and, do it if you want, or don't do it. I really don't care. So yeah, we're in Unit 2, so I went ahead and posted everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through briefly some of the different functions, then we'll go into a lot more detail about them. Okay, so I recommend you take notes, but like I said, I don't require it. Having said that, if you want me to ever help you with anything, first thing I'm going to ask you is to show me your notes. Okay, what happens if you don't have notes? I'm going to tell you to go watch the recording or go figure it out another way. Okay, is that harsh? Maybe. Is it fair? I think so. If you don't take notes, then how are you going to learn? So, just kind of go through that. I don't mean to be on a soapbox or anything. First thing to know is select. Okay? So select is going to be the SQL function that allows us to return data based on the different parameters we set. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so we have select, then we have create. Create is what allows us to create databases. It allows us to create tables. It allows us to create schema. Pretty much anything you can imagine. Okay, wait, whoops, I misspelled create. Okay, so that's going to be the create function. So making new things. Always going to start off with create. Okay, then we have drop. Drop is going to allow us to remove existing things. For example, let's say we created a table. We don't need that table anymore. All we have to do is use a drop function. Say drop space table name. Does that make sense? So drop just allows us to remove existing stuff. Update allows us to append new records. So for example, if I had an existing table, I can say update table name, and then tell it what I want to add to that table. Like I said, we'll see examples. Just understand the basics of these functions so far. Okay? And then the last function we're going to talk about for right now is alter. Alter allows us to change the columns of a table. So if we have a table, say we want to remove a column, we can do that with alter. Say we want to change the data type of a column, you do that with alter. Anything you want to do with the columns themselves, alter. Okay, everyone got these 5 functions. Okay, like I said, this is the most important stuff in SQL are those 5 functions. I can repeat anything that needs to be repeated. Okay, so let's talk about select. So to make a select statement, there's a very specific order we need to go in. Okay, we first say select. By the way, in SQL, you always want to make sure that you put your function names in all capitalization. Okay, so you say what you want to select. Maybe it's your variable names or your columns. Tell it which tables you're using. You do that in the from. So you select columns from table or tables, whichever one you have. Okay, so then once you've done that, you want to say where, and this is where you apply the conditions. So whatever conditions you want to apply, done inside the where. Okay, so select, from, where, and now this is where it gets kind of optional. You can use group by. Basically, you would use group by if you had multiple things you wanted to list. So for example, if you're selecting the revenues, you could do group by item, and it would give you the revenues of each item, okay, as opposed to just giving you the overall revenue. Does that make sense? So that's basically, and think about the pivot tables. Okay, the equivalent of this is going to be what in the pivot tables? So whatever we put inside the rows, that's the same as group by, or equivalent to group by. Okay? Having It's going to be another condition. We can apply a condition there if we choose. We'll see examples of that in a little bit. And then lastly, order by. Okay, so order by is going to be where we tell it what order to return the results from the database, from this query in. So for example, could we order by a column name? Yeah, we can. So you would just say order by whatever the column's name is. And you can also apply ascending or descending. So, if you wanted to put things in order from A to Z, is that going to be ascending or is that going to be descending? So you're going to be descending because you're going from A to Z. Okay? So make sure that you understand that as well. That's going to be your basic format of a select statement. Okay, any questions? And like I said, we'll see examples, but just understand, this order is vital. Okay, you got to memorize this order. Does that make sense? So make sure you understand select, from, where, group by, having, order by. Question? So if you had a question like that, you could go over to the, that's a good segue to this. I posted SQL functions. So you click on that. It's going to take you to this over here. So I'll show you some examples from this resource. Okay, basically it's going to be where we have some aggregate function we're using. So it's another condition. So I said where is a condition? Having is also a condition. Does that make sense? It's just, we'll talk about aggregate functions next class, but for now what's important is that you have this order down, that you sort of understand at a basic level what each of these parts of the select statement are. Okay? Any other questions? So like I said, this will give you, like if you forgot something, not a big deal, just go over to the SQL functions, it'll take you to this resource. You have anything you want in SQL, okay? Anything. So this is like a SQL textbook for free. Okay, is that a pretty good price? Okay, would anyone rather pay $50 for a SQL textbook? I didn't think so. Okay, so anything you need to know in SQL is going to be here. You have your basic select statement here. It'll give you some examples of it. Kind of tell you what to do a little bit. You can get all the different parts of the select statement, where, group by. It's all here. Okay, and it's going to give you different databases you can use. It's going to be a great resource. Okay, now this is not a database class. We're spending like 4 or 5 class days on SQL. So do I expect you to leave here as a SQL expert? No. Do I expect you to leave here as someone who can write a SQL statement? Yeah. Okay, is that fair? So that's what we're going to do today. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go back into Canvas. Like I say, I hope that you all took my advice and installed MySQL Server, MySQL Workbench, but if not, just follow along, take good notes. I've already got everything posted today, so, you're not going to be completely behind if you don't. Okay? But what I'd like us to do, just go ahead and download all the new stuff here. So we've got Chapter 3 and 4 tutorial. We won't be using that directly. Import course, download that. Import person, download that. Import employee, download that. Import registration, download that. And import section, download that. And also, go ahead and download this SQL class file.txt. Okay. And then while you all are downloading all of that, like I say, the software for MySQL is not going to be installed on the campus computers, so you'll have to use your personal computer. However, I will say this, I don't really require that you use SQL. Let me rephrase that. I require that you submit your homework as a text file. So technically speaking, could you do it without ever installing any sort of SQL database? You could. Okay? So it's up to you if you want to use it or not, but I'm going to be doing all the demonstrations with it, so you might as well. Question? Yeah. because like I say, the MySQL server and MySQL Workbench are not installed on the campus-owned computers. So for Lab 5, let's say you don't own a personal computer. Couple options. First one would be to use TechPack. I think it's like $50 a semester. That's one option. The other option is to work with someone in the class. Okay, so if you have a friend in here, you could certainly submit the same screenshot as them, but you got to make sure that you name it appropriately. Okay, does that make sense? So I don't care how you do the labs, just as long as you get them submitted independently. Question? It's free. So if you look at Lab 5, I've got the instructions on how to install it. That's why I suggested you go ahead and do it. But again, I don't require it. It's not due until, I think it's not due until next Monday. But I recommend you go ahead and do it. It's like a 15-minute process, not too challenging or anything. Yeah, it's due next Monday at 11:59 p.m. We were going to have Lab 4 done due today. However, the college asked all the faculty to push back assignments, not have anything due today, so, well, I'll listen to what they say, I guess, and push it back until Wednesday. But, like I said, this Lab 5 is due next Monday. So, you know, like I say, it's got instructions on there. That's why I suggested that you all go ahead and knock it out, but hey, it's up to you. Any other questions? All right. So, whenever you first open up MySQL Workbench, assuming you installed it correctly, it should give you a screen that looks like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new connection for each class. Okay, so I'm just going to go to this option right here, this little plus beside my connections. I'm just going to call this BA223, what's this, section 4. Okay, you can't put spaces in this name. Okay, it's got to not have any spaces. Just hit OK. Double click it. It's going to ask me for my default password. Since I've stored it in Vault, it won't. But if you didn't store it in Vault, it would ask you for that default password. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that file that I uploaded to Canvas into MySQL Workbench here. Okay, so now we've got our query, and we have everything we need to talk about. So, first thing is first, you want to right-click on whatever your default schema is over on the left side of the screen. You want to make sure you right-click that and set that as your default schema. Okay, if you don't do that and it's not bolded right here, it's not going to allow you to create a table. Does that make sense? Okay. So, like I said, you want to make sure that you right-click on this, make sure it's set as default schema. If it is, it's bolded. If it's not, it will not be bolded. Okay. So, let's take a look at what this looks like. So, we're using the create function, as we did up here. That's one of the functions we talked about was create. Now, we could create a database, but in this case, we're just going to create tables. So you just literally tell it table. Okay? And we're calling this first table person. Okay? So then you open up your parentheses. Everything within the parentheses is applied to the table creation. Okay? So what we've done here so far, just created this person table. Now we have all of our different columns that we're creating. Okay? So we're creating these, and you can see we have different data types, okay? 2 data types we're going to use in here are going to be big int. Okay, who can guess what big int is? What type of data type do you think that may be? It's going to be an integer, okay? Difference between int and big int. Big int allows us to store larger integers. We're not going to focus too much on that. And then we're also using varchar. Okay, varchar is variable length character. Okay, so that's the other main type of data type to know. And that's going to be just any sort of text field we may have. So, ID number, we're calling it a big int. We're assuming it's that type. We're applying a not null modifier to it. Okay, what does that not null mean? Boon. Well, it doesn't mean it can't be 0. It could be 0. What does it mean, Amon? Exactly. There's some value present there. 0 we wouldn't necessarily assume is missing. Does that make sense? So missing would be literally completely blank. Whereas 0 is technically still a value. Okay, so we've just got our f name next. We're applying varchar, and this open parentheses with the 15 in it, that's how long the variable length character is. Okay, so it's 15 characters long at max. Now, because it's not a char, because it's a varchar, it doesn't have to be 15, but it can't be more than 15. Okay, we could use 255 for everything and make it a little bit easier, but we're not. Okay, we're also saying that first name can't be null. Why would we want to make first name not null? Okay, does anyone not have a first name? If no one doesn't have a first name, then you want to make sure that you're not missing a first name. Okay, so we just have last name, social security number, phone number, address line 1, storing that as varchar, of course, address line 2. And then we have city. So city is going to be the city name. It's going to be a varchar length 20. State. Now, I said before, you only really need to know varchar and char, or varchar and big int. Char is just going to be a character that is not going to be a variable length. So instead of having something where it could be anywhere from 0 to however many you specify, it's always going to be 2 characters long. Does that make sense? Because we specified 2 right here. If this number were 10, what would it always be? How many characters would it always be? Be 10. That's exactly right, because it's whatever is inside of the parentheses that determines the length of it. Okay, so then after that we have zip code. Obviously zip code is going to be numeric, so we're going to apply the big int data type to it. Okay, then person status. We're using varchar 15 to tell what that status is. Okay, and then we're going to set the primary key equal to the ID number. Okay, so any questions about this table creation? Like I said, you create, use the create function, tell it what you're creating. That's going to be a table. Then you say what the table name is, open up a parentheses, start putting all of your different attributes from your ERD into here. Use logical data types. If it's going to be only numeric, what's the data type going to be? Something that's only numeric. Big int. Okay, if it's going to be a text data type, we're going to call that varchar. Okay, I'm perfectly happy if you use varchar open parentheses 255 for every varchar. That's totally fine with me. Because it's variable length, so you're unlikely to ever reach 255 characters, but I'd be completely fine if you put everything in that to make it easier. Personally, I recommend, if you're ever doing this professionally, that you use an actual reasonable length. So for example, do many people have a name longer than 15 characters? Do some people have a name longer than 15 characters? Yeah, they do. Okay, but if you have a name longer than 15 characters, is it likely to be the same as someone else's name that's also longer than 15 characters? In other words, are the first 15 characters of your name likely going to be unique enough to tell you apart from someone? Yeah, and first of all, your name is not even what's unique to you. So 15 characters of a name is probably enough. Some people only take 8 characters of a name. Okay, just be logical with it. Would you want to have this varchar be 2 for the first name? Why or why not? Someone answer that for me. Boone. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you may have, 50 different ANs for the first name. That'd just be ridiculous. You want to get enough of the first name to tell what it's going to be, but you don't have to get the entire thing. So it's perfectly okay to have this be 8 instead of 15. You could make it 255 as well. I would say anything smaller than 8 is probably not large enough, but just be realistic with your data types. Okay. Could you make an argument that address line 2 is not large enough? Okay, 25 characters for the first address line. Are there a fair amount of addresses that are larger than 25 characters in length? Yeah. And is address something that's important to have all of? Okay, if you're missing part of address, what does that mean? You try to send someone a letter. Okay, you guys ever sent a letter before? Okay, you don't put the whole address you think it's going to get there. It might. Would you trust USPS to get it there without the whole address? Wouldn't it be something I'd rely on? Okay, so should this be a little bit larger than 25, say 255? I think you can make that argument pretty well. Now, address line 2 is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Typically, what's this going to be? It's going to be an apartment number, right? Okay. Who has an apartment number longer than 25 characters? I highly doubt anyone does. So we could probably leave this as 25 characters and be just fine. Okay. City, 20, that should be enough. State, always going to be 2, so we can just use char. But I would also accept varchar here, by the way. Like I say, I'm only expecting you guys to know 2 data types, big int and varchar. Okay. So, you guys ready to create this table? All we got to do is just highlight it, and then just want to run this selection right here. So just go ahead and do that. And it says table person already exists. I guess I already did that. So that's okay. But if you haven't done that yet, then it would not be present. Okay? And then you'd be able to create it. So, everyone got to the point where they created it. Okay? So now what we want to do is we want to import that data. And there's a couple different ways we could do this. So, from the main schema, go to your tables, expand that out to your person table, and there should be this icon right here that looks like a spreadsheet with a data lightning bolt through it. Let's go ahead and click on that. Okay. So like I said, just mouse over that, click on the spreadsheet with a bolt on it, and that takes us to here where we can select star from sys.per. In fact, let's go ahead and go back to our first query here, and let's just drop this table for now. Okay, so I'm going to drop person, and I should make this all capitalized. Okay, so now if we run that, it should allow us to not have the person table there. So you got to make sure you specify what you're dropping, which is going to be a table. You can't just say drop person. So again, like I say, using one of these high-level functions, you say select what you're selecting, you say drop what type of thing you're dropping, update what you're updating, that sort of thing. So you have to say drop table if you're dropping a table. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we've got table drop. Let's go ahead and recreate it. So I've just recreated our table. Now let's go back. Refresh the schemas, by the way. I should have mentioned that. It's important that you refresh it every time you create a new table. Otherwise, it won't show up yet. So go ahead and click on that. Now, if we run this select statement, what this is saying is select star. That star is the wild card. Okay, that's going to select everything in the table. So you can say it's named schema. So that's the SYS. That's our schema. MySQL calls it a schema. It's basically the same as a database. Okay, does that make sense? So there's some technical differences, but just understand that it's database.tablename. Okay, so we're in sys.person. So it's going to select everything we have inside of here. Okay, and right now, you can see, what do we have inside of there? Do we have anything in the table yet? So there's a couple different ways we could add stuff to it. We can manually type it. But what's the problem with this? Okay, this is going to take quite a while, won't it? Okay. Now, do you guys think that I do things the slow and inefficient way? Okay. I almost never do things the slow and inefficient way. Okay. So we're not going to manually be typing anything. You can, and if we didn't have so many fields, maybe I would. What we're going to do instead, though, is go to this export and import. Second icon here is going to allow us to import records from an external table. So we're just going to click on that. And what we can do is going to open up a table data import wizard. Okay. So click on the browse, and wherever you just downloaded all of those files, you're going to want to go to the import person table. Okay, so that's going to be the CSV that I saved to Canvas. Let's go ahead and click open for that. Hit next. Now don't worry about this error because this error is not really something we're worried about. We want to make sure we use existing table. We just created the person table, so we can just use sys.person. Okay. UTF-8 is going to be the encoding type. We don't have to change that. Just leave everything default because I made sure to make sure that the order was the same as what we actually have for the data. Does that make sense? So if you were to open, I don't recommend you do this, but if you were to open up that CSV file, you would see that it's laid out in the same order that I created the SQL table in. That's very important that we do it in the same order because it makes our lives a lot easier. Okay, if we don't do that, we have to manually change each of these columns to be what they actually are. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a fun thing to do? I don't think it's a fun thing to do at all. So just make sure it's in the same order. Okay, just hit next. And look at that, it imported everything. So now, if we run this same statement right here, it's going to return all of the different records that we just imported. Okay, so again, it's made up data, obviously. Maybe some pop culture references, who knows? Okay, so is everyone to this point? Any questions so far? Amon. So that's a good question. Technically speaking, the answer is no. However, what will happen is that if you don't, it's going to run everything in the query statement. So this right here, this is just one line in the query statement. If we go over here to this query statement over here, it's 124 lines. And that's going to get us into some trouble if we run all of this at once. So, for example, if we ran this right now, it would throw an error immediately because we've already created the table person. We can't have multiple tables named person. Does that make sense? So, technically the answer is your queries can be run without highlighting what you're wanting to run. I would just recommend against it. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so next let's create our course table. So we just created a person table. And by the way, this person status variable, I should have made note of it. It's going to be if someone's a student, if they're a faculty, whatever they are. Does that make sense? Okay. So now for our course table, just creating the table just like we did before, create table. All that's going to be in capital letters. We're calling this one course. Open up your parentheses. Okay. You have course num, big int, not null. Course subject, it's going to be a varchar, not null. Credit, it's how many credit hours the course is, and then the course name. We called it varchar 99. Could we have done 255 here? Yeah, we could. However, do you think it's likely there are any courses that are 255 characters in length? I think it's pretty unlikely. Okay, so for this primary key, what is this going to be? What type of primary key is this? Composite key, that's exactly correct. It's comprised of two columns. Okay, if we were on an ERD, it'd be comprised of two attributes. Okay? So, everyone with me so far? So now I'm just going to select all this create statement. Just going to run it. Okay? So it made my course table. Okay, so now we refresh our schemas. And just like before, once we've refreshed the schemas, just go to this spreadsheet with the lightning bolt. Go to your import option down here, which can be the second option. Click on that. And we know we're in the course table, so we want to make sure we get the course file this time. So I just called it import course. Go ahead and open that guy. Ignore this error. Select the course table, which it already was, but it may not be. You always want to make sure that you select the appropriate table. Okay, so we just have 4 attributes here, 4 entities, or 4 columns, I mean. So we have our different courses. Just going to hit next. Hit next again. Next. And check that out. So if we run this query, it's got all the data we just imported. Okay? So, does everyone with me to this point? All right. So go back to our first query here. We're just going to do the same thing. So now we have our section table. Yeah, Boone. Yeah, pretty much. So I'll give you an ERD, and you will create tables with it, and you will probably also do some sort of queries. But I don't know what the queries will be yet, but there will be some queries that you'll make as well. So, and here's the thing. On the lab, I'm not going to give you a table that's got, 10 or 12 attributes. That'd just be silly, wouldn't it? So I don't want you to have to type this much. I would give you simpler tables, but make sure that you're ready for that. And that'll be due the 1st. So, like I say, we would have had a lab due today, but the college asked me to not have anything due today, so didn't want to go against them. We'll have 2 days in class to work on it, so won't be too bad. Any other questions? All right. So like I said, this is just creating a table for sections. So we've got all of our different attributes, or different, I should say, columns listed here. We've got their data types, and we have any sort of modifiers we want to apply, like not null, anything like that. Okay, the primary key. Who can tell me what the primary key for the section table is? Okay, who can tell me what this primary key is? Boone. Yeah, course registration number, CRN. Exactly right. We just specify it by saying primary key, whatever primary key is. All right, so let's just go ahead and create this table. All right, here's a pop question. Who can tell me how to import the data? Who can walk me through that? What do I do? How do I import the data into the section table? Boone. This guy right here with the spreadsheet with the bolt, now what? So that would be to see what's already in here. This is a select statement to return everything from the section table. I want to put new data into it. Okay, so this guy right here, that's right. Okay, so now we just change this to be import section. Okay, just like I say, ignore this error. And what table does this go in, Boone? So it goes into section, right? Okay. We just hit next, 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 finish. Okay. Now, how do I make sure that I actually have the data in here? 2 ways I could do it. Can you tell me what one of them is? Well, I could run this select statement right here. That's certainly one way. Or I could have hit this refresh right here. Okay. 2 different ways to do it. On an exam, you would only answer with a select statement, because the select statement returns what's inside the table. All right. So I'm just going to go kind of quickly through this last table so we can get to doing some actual queries today, because that's what's actually interesting. Okay. So again, we have foreign keys here. So this is just where we create a constraint. The constraint is going to be something that we call it. So this is making sure that ID number exists inside of the person table. Okay, because if it doesn't exist in the person table, it means we can't create it yet. So it's very important that we do anything with a foreign key, we create that last. Does that make sense? Because this constraint is making sure that it exists inside of wherever it originates. Okay, that's a very important thing to know. Does that make sense to everybody? Tables with foreign keys, create them last. Okay. So creating a table, call it registration. Got our primary key is a composite key comprised of both CRN and ID number. Okay, so because it has a composite primary key and multiple foreign keys, what type of entity do we think this likely is? Okay, who can tell me what type of entity they think this is? Starts with an A. That's right, it's an associative entity. So it's an associative entity between the section and the person tables. So let's just go ahead and create this guy. Refresh our schemas. Let's see, we just create a registration, so we go to registration, import records from an external file, browse to where that file is. So import registration, probably this guy right here, I'd say. Ignore the error. Make sure you select the proper table. Okay, this looks good enough to me. All right, so like I said, there's two different ways we could see that it has everything. Refresh it that way. A better way is just to execute that query. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Okay, you guys ready to do some select statements? So we've already done some. We used the wildcard to select everything. But what if we don't want to select everything? What if we just want to select certain columns? Can we do that? Yes, we can. Okay. So let's come back up to the person table. And let's say we wanted to select a few columns from it. Select. What do we want to select from the person table? What do you guys want to know about these people? You guys want to know their name? Okay, so we can get the F name. What else do we want to get? Anything else we may want to get from the person table? Okay, so there's really a lot of different things we could get. Last name, make sure I spelled that right. I did not. Any other attributes or any other fields, I should say, you're interested in seeing? Okay. Why not get the date of birth while you're at it? Steal some identities here. Do we have date of birth? We don't have it. We should. Okay, I think this is enough. So like I say, select, and you have to tell it where to select it from. Okay? So we can do this on one line, which is what I'm going to do, or you can do it on multiple lines, which is what I will not do. I think it's a lot easier to just have it all on one line. It's easier to read, in my opinion. Most people disagree with me on that, and that's fine. So you're saying select, columns you want to select, tell it where you're selecting it from, and where are we selecting it from? So sys.person, and again, we get sys from the schema name, which is basically just the name of the database it's all in. Does that make sense? So MySQL calls it schema. Almost everything else calls it database. There will be some differences, some very slight differences from MySQL to others. We could end it here if we wanted. Okay. And I think to keep things nice and simple today, that's what we'll do. Okay, so we have all the different names. Just returns them all. And because we got the first name, the last name, and their social security number, that's exactly what it returns. Okay? We've got some different names here and some social security numbers. Obviously, these are all fake names. Okay? I'm not going to give you someone's real social, now would I? Okay. I'd be pretty blockheaded to do that, wouldn't I? All right, but let's say that we didn't want them in this order. Okay? So, are we going to use order by to change the order of the columns? No, we're not. To change the order of the columns, what we do is we just change them in the query. Okay, so we're just going to make a new select statement. Let's say I want to have a social security number first. I just put it first in the query. And let's say last name goes second. And finally, we put the first name last. Okay, from sys.person. Okay, and technically speaking, you don't have to end these with a semicolon. It's best practice to, though. So I wouldn't count off if you didn't end your statements with a semicolon, but I think you should end them with a semicolon. Okay, so let's run this. And now you see how the order is Social Security number first, last name second, first name third. Okay, getting kind of interesting. Well, I hope so. Okay. Now, let's say that I want to have them be ordered by the Social Security number. Okay, so I still want to just get this same stuff, but I want to order by Social Security number this time. Okay, so look at the order of everything. We always start with a select statement, which we have here, telling it which fields we're selecting, telling it where we're selecting those fields from. We're not applying any conditions. Okay, we're getting everything. We're not applying any conditions. We'll do conditions tomorrow, but for now, we're just going to do group by. And we're going to use Social Security number. Okay, so let's see if this works. And it is a little bit difficult to do this on a touchpad, I must admit. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, now, which order are they in? They're in order by Social Security number. Okay. So, that's basically what we're going to cover in terms of all of this. Any questions about anything so far? Okay. Next class, we're going to pick up with doing some aggregate functions, doing a lot more with different queries. But for now, make sure you understand the order of functions that we're using. That's very important that you understand that. Also, make sure that you understand how to import data. That's going to be very important. Make sure you can import data. And yeah, make sure you understand the basic parts of a select statement. All right, like I say, everything's posted online. I strongly encourage you to complete Lab 4 and Lab 5 by Wednesday's class. It's not really a requirement or anything. I just encourage you to do so you can follow along. But apart from that, have a great day. See you all Wednesday.